Hi and welcome to 3dmolif.com. My name is Kyle Howard and welcome to the materials in Unreal Engine 4. This course is for beginners at the start, and then we're going to go into more intermediate stuff, and right at the end we're just going to look at a tiny little bit more advanced stuff. In volume 1 we are going to be looking at the Unreal Engine 4 material interface. We're going to look at material types, then we're going to talk about the PBR materials overview. And then we're going to look at material blends and the material domains, and then we're going to talk about the shading modules overview. And then with that information we are then going to start on our first shader, which is an unlit shader module, which will be a computer screen, and that will be in volume 1. So let's get down to it. So firstly, let's start off looking at the material interface. Now I've just made a quick new material, and as you can see up here, if you're familiar with UDK, you'll notice that this pretty much kind of looks the same, except this time we're not building our materials this way, we're building them this way. So you're going from right to left. Now up here is our toolbar, so the only really ones that you'll be using will be save. There's a lot of that up here. You can open assets, but that is pretty much just like a massive content browser, and then if you end up clicking on one of these, you will end up opening one of your one of these things. Let's just go plastic material, double click, and then there you go, it opens up the material for that. And then if you go to edit, you can see we got undo asset. You'll be able to see here in the asset your size map, so you'll be able to see how big this map for the material is. And you got a reference viewer as well, so you'll be able to see some things that are connected to that. And then inside of Windows, you got some of these that you can uncheck and check. Now normally you have status down here, and you can see your mobile status if you click that or uncheck that, and you have the status here. I normally typically have this off, so I'm just going to close that window, and final result, I'm just going to close that window too. You can see here that we have our palette. And I'll quickly go over that before I end up closing it, because this is again something that I don't personally use, but you can keep that up there if you like. You can also get your HLSL code, so if you want to check out the code, you're more than welcome to do that. And you can also copy it if you need to paste it into another one. And then we won't bother looking at that, and then you got some document stuff here. Now here is our material, so you'll be able to just left click and rotate around this. You right click and zoom in and out. You can zoom in and out with the middle mouse wheel as well. So if you zoom out, you end up zooming into a lot, and then it start inverting on that, so it'll always go out. Then you got up here, you got some real time. You can show the status of this, and you can show the frame rate. You can change the field of view if you like. You can check it from different. You can also see your material in unlit mode as well as all these other ones. I'm just going to leave that lit, and then you can see your grid if you need it, and the background if you need to do that, but I'm just going to leave those both off. As you can see here, I'll be able to, you can also make these windows bigger if you ever need to check out your material in a bigger window. You see here that we got a cylinder, sphere, plane, as well as a cube. And if we go over here, I'm just going to click this rounded cube here. And then if we come back here and then we go, this will set whatever you have selected in the content browser as your viewer thing here. So this is quite a big thing, so I'm just going to push F to focus on that. There we go, we've got our rounded cube here. If I go back, and then you see this is quite far, again just push F and then you can do that again. Now if you hold L down, you'll be able to rotate the light inside the viewer. Okay, so I'm just going to resize this. And here is your details panel. So you can add physical materials. So this is mainly used for sound effects. So if you're walking on grass and you've made a grass material, you can set up that there. And then we have these material domains, blend modes. We're going to have a look at all this in a bit. And then we've got two-sided materials. We will go over most of these settings while making our materials. Over here we have like settings for translucency, which some of these we'll be going over. We have self-shadowing, and then what our usage are, and then you can do some mobile stuff. Tessellation, we will be looking over tessellation in volume 2. And then we have post-processing material, and we have some light map settings, but we're not going to mess around with any of these. And then here we have our view mesh, preview mesh, which is this here. You can also just click that and find a different mesh if you like. Okay, up here we have our toolbar here. If you end up selecting these, you can get the viewport, you'll be able to drag them out and move them anywhere. So you can customize these viewports as much as you like. So we can have our view and details here, but I'm just going to leave that as they are. If I right click, I can hide the tab. There we go. Again, here we can do that. And to get that up, you just want to click that again. So up here we have save, find in content browser. If we just do that, it's just going to snap us into content browser and find the material there. You can apply, as well as search. So you'll be finding your results. I'm just going to middle mouse button, close that again. Then we have home, cleanup. So if you got any massive material and you don't know if there's any nodes in there that you haven't used, you can click cleanup and it will get rid of any unused ones. But just beware, because if you're still making them and you accidentally hit that, then it's going to delete some if it's not connected to this. We have live preview, which is going to toggle the live preview here. We have live nodes and live update. Now live nodes are just going to make sure that the nodes, when they come up, you'll be able to. So if I get pan up, we'll just get this noise. We'll just get this noise in here, and then we'll just shove that in there. Stop our preview. And then we drag that in here. Set that at 0.5. And see that we've got this material here now. And if we uncheck these, you can see now that this is static and that goes back to its normal value. If we go live nodes, you can see these are updating live, and if we uncheck that and we go live update, it's just going to stay the same as well. I normally keep this as well as live nodes on, but for the moment we're just going to keep them off. I'm going to delete these, and you have status and mobile stats when you get your status bar up, but I'm going to leave that. Now over here on the palette is where you can find all of the things you can use while making materials. Now if I come down here, you can see these numbers here. That is just pretty much saying that if I hold the number 2 down on the keyboard and click, we now have a constant 2. And if we keep scrolling down, you can see that panner is a P, texture coordinate is a U. So we go U, there we go, texture coordinate and P, there we go, we've got our panner. But I mostly close this, and I will end up using the right click. So if I right click in here, you can see that I can get this window to pop up. Now to navigate around this place, you want to left click hold to move. You can zoom in and out with the mouse. You can also hold alt down and left right click, and you can zoom in and out that way. You have left click to be able to use the marquee, and then if we just click once on the right, then we can get this up. And in here we could just search for panner. There we go, we have our panner there. Or if we just delete that, and then we went to coordinates, and then we have our panner here. So I don't have the palette open, but you are more than welcome to keep this open and use this to your leisure. Next, we're just going to have a quick look at material types. In this section, we're going to talk about the different material types that you can find inside of Unreal. So if I just bring this out a bit, we can get different materials by either going add new, and we have materials here, and we also have materials and textures, or inside the content browser, just right click, and again you have materials there, and if you scroll down, materials and textures. Now we all know what the basic material is. We're going to be using a lot of them. We also use material functions in this volume. That will be later on. And what a material function is that we can basically make some parameters that go together and add some math, and it would basically make our workflow a lot easier. And we will use this, and you'll get a better understanding of what I'm trying to get at with that. With a material instance, we are again going to be using these. These are great for if you have something like a whetstone and you want to be able to control the parameters of how much wetness there is, and you can just make a material instance and it will basically use this material, and then you can have a wet version and a non-wet version, and we're going to be using this inside of our computer screen tutorial later on in this volume. We have a material parameter collection, which will basically, it contains a list of parameter names and their default values. It says it right there. I personally have not used this yet, so if you end up needing to use anything like this, I recommend giving it a look. We also have media texture, and what a media texture is if we just make this new texture here, I'm just going to leave this as video texture, and if I double click to open it, I'll bring this window as our full screen here. So over in media player, we can just click this arrow here, and we have the UE4 intro logo, which I'm going to add inside of this inside of the content browser. You'll be able to find that, and it would just be under textures. Now that we've added that here, we can add this to a scene. So I'm just going to bring in this sky sphere that I've got. I'm going to set this to 0. This is a free skybox which I managed to get from the internet. That'll be in a readme file with this tutorial if you want to get one of these yourself. Okay, and then if we grab in one of our meshes and we bring in this sphere, again, I'm just going to set that to 0. I'm going to push F so I can focus on it. And then over here we'll get this texture, the video texture. I'm just going to drag and click onto here. That's going to make a new texture material for this. And once it's compiled, we will see the video start playing on here. Just going to double check that this is actually working. There might be a problem. So our problem was I didn't have a light in here, so I just built a quick light. Sorry. I'll just set this as movable so we don't have that lighting build error. So if I push F to focus, you can see now that the texture is now showing up. Okay, so that's what the media texture does. You can also create render targets. So if you need a 2D render target, same with cube render target. You can both use this is for the 2D and this is for the 3D. Then we have subsurface profile here, which is to basically use subsurface color and fall off. This would be good for doing subsurface profile, making subsurface materials, things like skin, wax, and jade. I'm just going to delete that. Now if I right click, I come back to materials. If we now go to my sky, let's say that I've got this sky here. I'm just going to delete this at the scene because it's kind of distracting. And this texture that I downloaded, you can see, is a cube map. So we've got this long cube map here, and this is also a HDR one. So I also have a SM sky sphere, which I actually grabbed from the engine content. So if this isn't in yours, you can go into the engine content and you can search for sky. We'll do it in here. Click enter, and we can basically just click on this one. Let that load. Now that's loaded, we can come over into the viewport. You see that we got this sky here. And I have this sky sphere mesh. If I just find the mesh now and click find in content browser, you have this here, and you can just move that into one of the folders. To set up the sky materials, they're pretty easy as well. We're just using a unlit opaque, and we're just using a vector 3 in a reflection vector, and we're just using that cube map that we want. That way when we rotate, it's like that. And then we have our sky material like that. So that's just a quick overview if you need to make anything like this, or if these aren't here and I haven't attached them. So if these aren't here, then you can just basically do that yourself with this sky sphere. So that's basically a quick overview of the types of materials that you can use. Next, we're going to have a little talk on PBR materials and what they are. In this chapter, we will go over what PBR materials are. Now, PBR means physically based rendering. And as you can see in here, this scene, we have a metallic and gloss. Back in the previous generation, it was specular, and normally you would use specular power. You have albedos, which are pretty much diffuses, and you also have the main one that stayed the same is pretty much normal map. But there are a load of emissive maps and stuff like that. They're pretty much the same. But metallic and gloss, as you can see here, are the main ones that that you get are used for your reflection values. So you can see we have metallic up here, and it's zero. If I just focus, Unreal Engine has this color here. So it's just I just left a normal color on here, dark black color. And you can see that as we get to number 1, it becomes just basically a black board. But that's because of the chrome and metal. If this was a different color, which we will look at up in a second, you'll notice that this is definitely metal. Normally you wouldn't use the values in between because objects will either be metal or non-metal. You don't really have any between, but I'll admit I sometimes use a bit of metallic when I'm doing water shaders because it just makes it look a little bit more nicer. Then we also have gloss. I'm going to push G just to hide some of those things. As you can see, at 0 gloss, I'm just going to quickly ungroup them. 0 gloss here. As you can see with this, we have a really shiny ball. Now if we end up going all the way to 1, you can see that the roughness on this is much rougher. So basically the light would be hitting it and then it would be scattering all over the place. Whereas this over here, the light hits it and bounces straight off. What I mean by that is there are some articles, so there are plenty of PBR articles that you can find on the internet. This one is done by Marmoset Toolbag, which you can find on their main website, and it's just under tutorials. And then go to Marmoset Toolbag too. And in this one, we just basically he talks about the diffusion and reflection. And you can see, so the reflection is straight off, and diffusion you would have it so it hits the surface, and because of the noise it would end up basically scattering around and it comes out less reflective. He also talks about metals, Fresnels. As you can see in this thing here, you have a chrome and then how much of the fall off of the edges with the Fresnel, and then rubber here. You have your center and edge here. Everything always has a Fresnel. You also have micro surface, which is pretty much just a gloss inside of the roughness map inside of Marmoset. So if you have Marmoset, you can play around with those there. So you can see on this picture with the microsurface sample, you have the reflectivity is 5% on the mud, and the gloss is 16%. So you can see it's pretty glossy. It's glossy in a way because of the wetness from, I guess, when it's rained. And then you would have the water here, which is pretty much 100% gloss, and then you get that shine. And as you remember, in Marmoset Toolbag, the gloss is 100%, which is 1. In Unreal Engine 4, it's the opposite way around. So remember, 0 is glossy, 1 is rough. There are also, in the conclusion, John Habel, who has done Everything is Shiny and Everything has Fresnel. They're well worth reading, and there's a couple of more based on the importance of being linear, so you can look at the sRGB and what that is. We also have Don't Nod, who are the guys who made Remember Me and Life is Strange. They have a couple of things on here for the values of these luminosities, medium values, sorry. And then you can see here, they show that the metallic and roughness as well. And you can see here, it shows that how 0 is reflective, and then here 1 is rough. And there's a lot of information on here about all types of the roughness and the metallic, so you can definitely check them out if you like. And there's also another one on Marmoset's website, which is PBR in Practice. You can also click on that one, and you can see here the albedo, the linear values and sRGB values. We have microsurface, which is the gloss. As you can see, 1 is glossy, 0 is rough. Then you've got the same with reflectivity here. Ambient occlusion is normally separated now, so you won't bake the ambient occlusion inside of the diffuse map. As you can see, here is a perfect example. So for this camera that is created by, I believe it's Joe Wilson. You see this camera here, you're using an albedo, which is just a normal flat color image. You don't want any lighting detail in here. You have your microsurface, so for the scratches and stuff, so you can choose which is reflective and what's not reflective. Again, here you have your metalness map, so you can choose, like, this can be, reflectivity is a bit different in Marmoset, but you can have here, so this is a shine of the bronze, which is being used here, that piece there. And then you have the normal map here, which is still the same. And that is another good one to look at. If we just pop up here, you can see here that I've got two materials. So I have a really shiny glossy ball, and then I have a really shiny metal ball. So this is just with 0 gloss, and this is one with 0, I believe 1 on metallic. So you have your metallic at 0, your roughness at 0.2, and then in this one we have the metallic is 0 and the roughness is 0 to get that glossy effect. And just come up here, we have two plastic balls here. This is a glossy plastic ball, and then here you can see the roughness is less on here. And if we just open that, you can see here with the material, you can see that we're just multiplying this with the roughness of the base color, and then we're using a lerp to basically set that value as 0.8, and then 1 is the lowest values. And then we got our normal map there. If we just open up this one, you will see, just open up the material. You can see here that we're using 0.35, so that's just giving that gloss there. Now if I change this value to 1, you can see it's a lot more rough. And then if I change that to 0.1, you can see this is going to be glossy. Okay, I'm just going to not save that. As you can see up here, I then have a silver ball and a gold ball. Now these are using the exact same texture. This one's just using these color values, which I grabbed off one of the links that we've gone through. So if you come up back to here, I just pretty much copied this color here and I pull it into here. So you can see the colors pretty much the same. I believe this one in here though, I lit it up slightly for Unreal to show off the material. Okay, so that's a quick overview of physically based materials. You can see again, as a recap, you have 0 metallic, and then you have metallic, and then gloss is just really shiny 0, and then you have gloss 1 is really rough. And remember that your albedos, you can put, I have seen people put ambient occlusion inside of their albedo maps, but you kind of want to stay away from that if you can and if possible. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at the material blends in UE4. During this chapter, we're going to have a look at the different types of blend modes that are found in the material editor. I'm just going to click on this. This is our default one. So if I just open up this material and then I just dock it up here, you can see that we're using a material domain of surface and we're using the blend mode opaque. And as you can see, we're just multiplying this with a grey, which is a constant 1 at 0.5, so that's middle grey value. Then we've got a metallic of 1, so we can get that metallic value. If I change that to 0, you're going to see that it gets rid of that metallic value. So so it doesn't look like metal any longer. I'm going to set that back to 1, and we're just multiplying this with a constant 1 so we can change the UV scale. So if we change this, it will change the size of our scale here. You can see that the detail is now a lot more smaller, and tiles a lot more. If I change that to 1, you're going to see this is going to be a lot more larger detail. You can see it's a bit more pixelated, as we were close with that. And if you just multiply a constant 1 with a texture coordinate, you can just do that. If you leave these at 1, and then you can change that to whatever value that you like. Then we'll just have the normal map there to give us that bumpiness. And then we'll just got it with that reflective, the roughness value. You can see here in the roughness, we're using 0.35, sorry. And as I said, that was just an opaque, and when using a default lit, we haven't changed anything else in these settings here. Okay, I'm just going to click no for that. Next is this fabric material, so you can see that we have some alpha going on here. And if we open up this material, I'm just going to get the fabric up. You can see that we here are using the blend mode masked, which is just under opaque. And then with the mask, we can use that to set up the ripping that's going on inside of the texture. We could also change that if we want to, so we can just add that with a power node. And if we pop this into the opacity mask, it's going to see that as we get less, it's a bit more, it's more solid. And then if we go for, let's go with 8, we should have a lot more ripping going on here. There you go, the rips just become more prominent. I'm just going to pop that green back into its opacity mask. And with masked on, you are going to see that opacity mask will uncheck. If we go back to the metal map there, and we just open that, you can see opacity mask here is grayed out. Same with opacity there. Okay, so again, your opacity mask is unlocked. I'm not going to save that. Next, we have this glass. I'm just going to make this window a bit bigger actually, just so that we can see these materials a little bit better. Okay, so we have this glass material, and when you rotate, you can see we have some form of refraction going on, and some bumpiness in the glass. So we just got some of that refraction. And again, if we just open up this material, just dock that, we have the refraction here, which unlocks because we're using translucent, and we also have the opacity here, which is unlocked, so you can have the transparency of the translucent material. I'm pretty sure I didn't change anything else in here. However, we are going to look at some of these settings. With translucency, you have some of these things here, and just changing some of these settings will change how the reflectivity would look, and the translucency, sorry. Not sure that one works, so we're just going to go surface translucent volume. I'm just going to let that compile. Okay, there you go. And if we go back to volumetric non-directional, you can see this is a bit darker. To really see these types of changes and see what they do, you just can read up on these and change this. They used to be, to get glass, you used to be able to change to one of these to get really nice looking glass, but it seems like now, especially with a normal map, because normal maps didn't work that well when it was just a default translucency in the previous version, but in 4.9 and I believe 4.8, it's a lot more better now. And then here we just have this reflection vector, which is just added with the cube map of the Tokyo Big Sight. Big Sight 3K, and we're just multiplying this with a constant and then adding again another constant. That's just gonna basically brighten that, make it a little less prominent. And then we have our roughness is 0, so we can have that reflective value because mirrors in glass are completely flat, so they have a gloss of 0, so there's no scattering going on. And we just have our opacity. If we change this to 1, you can see this is going to be no opacity, so it's going to be full. Just let that compile. You can see there's less translucency. If I go 0, we aren't really going to see this ball anymore. There you go. The ball's completely disappeared. I'll just change that back to 0.5. We have this normal map, which is the same with the plastic one that we used in the previous textures. And then again, refraction. With the refraction, if I set this to 0 and let this just compile, I'm going to bring this window out whilst it does that. You can see there's a slight refraction, but if I change that to 1, it's a little bit more. It's hard to tell in this viewer. You're better off rendering and having a look in there. These materials are in the project files, so you can mess around with these values if you like, especially the refraction. I'm just going to close that. I'm just going to leave that as no. Next, we have this hologram material, which we got going on. It's just got some code in there, and it's got these things spinning, and then some of the bars that are popping up. And then if I open up this material, you can see over here, I'm just going to flatten that out so you can see it better. We're using an additive material here, and we have that as unlit because we want this to be this could show even in dark environments. And this is just driven through an emissive map. So if you see, because I've done unlit, we have the emissive color there, opacity, world, and these ones which you can use. If I actually change that back to the default lit version, you can see that you have the opacity there and your refraction for the additive, but I'm going to change that back to unlit, and then that's going to show up. We're going to be going over this, how to create this in later on in this volume, so we're not going to have a look at that material quite yet. I'm going to put that as no. And then here we are using the modulate, sorry. So just make that bigger. That's just an emissive color. Go straight into that. And again, we have that as unlit. We can set that as default. And then when we set that as default, you can see that we got this error here. So I'm going to just put that back to unlit. And then you can only use emissive color and world position offset. And we just use the this green color here. I can change this color if I like. And we can go for a pinkish red. And if I click apply, you can see how this affects the environment. So it's pretty much just this fall off going on. And if I rotate, it multiplies with anything in there. So it's just little, it's basically like a fuzzy ball type thing. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the different material blends. Next, we're going to have a look at material domains. So let's go and do that next. Now we're going to have a look at material domains. So, as you know, the first one is just this one, which when I click on it, we have the material domain of surface. And we're going to have a look at deferred decal, light function, and post-processing. We won't use user interface, that is a new one, so before I updated this to 4.9, so we're not going to look at that one. Okay, so as you can see, this was just that simple material, so we can get the ripping going on at the bottom of the texture. It's a double-sided material, so yep, I've got two-sided all going on there. I do not want to save that, so that way you can get in there and you can have a look around at the double-sided, and then there you go. Next, we have something called a decal. Now, decals can be found in modes and visual effects, and then you have the deferred decal here. Now all you need to do is drag it in. You get this box here. And if I pull that right up, and then I get, let's get the material, sorry. So we want the blood splatter there. And then there should be some settings that we can change. Scale. There we go. Bring that out. You can see that we can get that blood to show up. And just bring it a lot closer if we want to as well. Just going to delete that. And as you can see, if I click on this one, that box pretty much almost encompasses this dark floor here. And then we have this dry blood, which is showing. And to get that material, it's just a blood splatter material here, which you can find in materials and material domains. We just got to double check that blood splatter. Now this is using a material that I created using Substance Designer, so you may have to get the plugin of Substance plugin, which can be found in the marketplace, and it's for free as well, so there's no need to worry about that. And if I keep going down, it should be down here. There you go. So just under materials and effects, just keep coming down. You get the Substance plugin, and then you can just change, pick the version that you're using, and then install a plugin, and then that'll be usable. You don't need Substance, I believe, to get this working. It's just in case you are using any Substance files. I am using this, which is a Substance file. And then we just have our dry red blood here. I'm just going to make this flat. So we have our dry blood here. Sorry, I didn't mean to click that. We can start previewing these nodes as well. And then if I stop, we have our roughness. And then we're just using this in the materials here. If I change this to 0, you'll see that it's a lot more shiny, and it doesn't look that great. You sometimes get this red like lens flare, so I'm just going to leave that at 8 point. I believe I had it maybe 8.6. No, just 0.8. So let that just compile again. Here you can go. You can see it's less reflective. That way it's not too obvious. And then we have, and that's going into the roughness. We have a metallic because blood does have iron in it, so I've added some of the metallic in there just to give it that bit more, to make it look a bit more like blood. And we are multiplying the alpha and the base color together in the emissive color, just so that it's bright. We're using stain as well, because when you're on deferred decal, you have these decal blend modes, so you can have translucent, stain, normal, so it would just be the normal map. You have the emissive, and then here you can choose different debuffers depending on what you want. I haven't used volumetric distant function, and it's experimental. I'm pretty sure sometimes it will show up, sometimes it will not. And by that I mean the material will fully render on here instead of just being a checker box. And then we just got this normal map here just to make that bump out a little bit. I'm not going to save that. There you go. You can just see that it's nice and smooth and it's not too reflective. Okay. Over here, I'm just going to bring this out a bit more. We have a thing called a light function, which is just, if I scroll down here, under light function, we have this here. We can change these values if we need to be. So, okay, so I'm going to bring that in. And then you get this really weird type of effect going on. I don't use that. I keep that as the normal. When you've got a light function, you can choose one of your things. Take into note though, if you choose a material that is not a light function, it will not show up. And then we just get those caustics back. This is kind of like if you were walking down a hallway and you had a reflection of these caustics on the ceiling or something, and you want that to show via the light showing. This is a movable, so it's totally dynamic. I'm just going to open up this caustics, and here you can see the material domain here is called light function, which only allows emissive color. And if I come over here, you can see what we've done, where we got 4 panning caustic materials, which you have one going that direction, one going that direction, one going that direction, and one going that direction. So if I click on this, we have 1, 1, and then I think the speed is pretty much almost the same on them. Some of them have a little bit of differences. I'm pretty sure, yeah, these ones are rotators and these ones are panners. So these ones are rotating, one's rotating that way and then the other would be rotating that way. And these panners will have one going this way and that one going that way. Okay. Then we also have these panners here. This is using text coordinates, so we have some smaller ones. And then we have this panner here, and we're just adding them together and making them multiply to get this effect going on here. Okay. Next, we have our a box here called post-processing volume. I'm just going to click on this box. And if you see, if I open up post-processing volume over here, sorry, you scroll right down. We don't want auto exposure. We do want blendables. Now in blendable, you can have this thing called an array. If you add an element, you can create a material array. Now I'm using this material post-processing here. If I change this and I get inside of the box, it's not going to do anything. So if I change that back to post-processing 2 and I now get into the box, you can see this, we've got this like horror type of effect going on. It's not fantastic, and you can see that we have these lines, so it's kind of like you're looking through some kind of monitor on a horror type game. You've got this noise that's panning up that way and then one rotating and then these refresh lines that are snapping back and forwards. And again, in the post-processing, we're just using the material domain post-process, sorry. And I'm pretty sure none of these settings down here are different. It's just blendable location we put is replace the tone mapper. You can do before translucency, before tone mapping, and after tone mapping. But I've done that, replaced the tone mapper. You can see that I'm using some materials here. So I've got these panning noise textures that I have, and then having them multiplied just to darken some areas. And then I'm just multiplying them again with another one, which is just making it brighter in some areas and darker in others. And then I'm just adding it with, if I preview this node, okay, it's snapping pretty quickly, but you can see that we're mainly focusing on the blue channel. So we have this blue channel here, the green channel has this triangle thing, and then this red channel has the dots there. And then we're just using a time with a sign of 0.01, and then we are using that speed value there, and then we're just adding them together to get that flickering going on. Sorry, sorry, did not want to do that, so just go back a step. I want to go to stop previewing, but for some reason it's still got start, so I'm just going to do that again. And then you can see that the line there, I've used the power just to make it more faded, and then multiplying that with a 1 so it's less obvious. So you can see it's a bit dimmer there. And then that added together, and then we are adding it with something called a scene texture, which is the post-processing 01. And we're just masking out the green channel and adding these together. This is used also, I believe, in one of the marketplaces. So if we go to Learn and you go to download stylized rendering, they actually use one of these post-processing material domains in that. So you can give that a look if you want to download that. So that's a quick overview of the material domains that you can use, except for the last one there, which is user interface. Next, we're going to go and look at shading modules and the different types of shading modules, and throughout the on the last bit of this volume and throughout volume 2, we're going to be making materials based on these different types of shading modules. So we're going to quickly go over a brief overview of that in the next video. So we're not really going to look at any materials in this video, but we're going to quickly discuss the shading modules, and we're going to talk about like the materials that we are going to create through the rest of this course. So coming down here to shading modules, we have default lit. Now default lit is what you're primarily going to end up using. You have the base color, the metallic, specular roughness, and emissive color, and down here you got your normal world position offset, as well as your ambient occlusion and pixel depth offset. I haven't used this one yet personally, so I don't know what that does, but the rest I understand. So yeah, that's the default lit. Now we're going to be going over in first volume, in volume 2, in volume 2, we're going to go over a default lit opaque module, and we're going to create a simple ocean shader that you can basically goes by absolute world space. So if you ended up stretching the tessellated plane, it still would tile and it wouldn't stretch and look a bit weird, but we'll see that once we get to it. We're also going to have a look at unlit, and we're going to do that in our next video by creating a computer screen. And as you can see here, with unlit you are only allowed with emissive color, world position offset, and pixel depth offset. World position offset we're going to be covering as well in a couple of our videos. And see what that does, especially in the ocean shader. And then with the emissive color, because this is unlit, the emissive color basically allows it so that if you have a texture or a color, so if I just get a constant, and I'll just set this to 1, this is just going to be a white ball that in even a completely dark environment you would be able to see. And obviously if I wanted it to be brighter, that might be a bit too excessive. Let's change it to 10. Yeah, so you'll have like this big glowy light, which would be good for a simple, like just a lamp or light shade that's glowing, and you want that going on. So that's just unlit. And we're going to do that with our computer screen. Then we have subsurface, which we will again be covering. Now subsurface in this one unlocks the opacity as well as subsurface coloring. Now for this we're going to be creating a simple skin texture, and with the pre-integrated skin, this is pretty much the exact same. You can see that there's no differences when I select on these two, so you have the exact same modules that are unlocked. I believe that the pre-integrated skin is just a little bit more cheaper, cheaper than the subsurface. We also have clear coat, which we are going to be creating. So we're going to create a car type material using clear coat, so you can use this on basically a car. This clear coat one also unlocks clear coat and clear coat roughness, so I'm going to be doing some layering layering later on as well, so you can learn about how to make layers. And we're also going to be looking at things called like material, like proper material functions as well. Subsurface profile we will not be covering, but if you want to look at that yourself, you are more than welcome. In subsurface we're just going to stick with that one instead of going into these other two. And then with two-sided foliage, we're not again going to be covering that one, but if you want you can quickly, the two-sided is pretty much, you got your subsurface color here and your opacity. It's pretty much the same as subsurface. As you can see, there is not much difference in the ones that are locked and unlocked. It's looking at that, it's just exactly the same. Two-sided foliage just basically means that if you had a tree and you were looking directly at it, you're going to be able to see both of the sides, and it would also be double-sided subsurface scattering. So let's just a quick look at what those shading modules are and which ones we're going to be covering through these next two volumes. Next we're going to do an unlit material, which is going to be the computer screen, and then that is going to be a couple of videos because we're going to look at material functions as well. And then after that that will be the end of the first volume, and then in volume 2 we will be looking at things like an ocean shader, the car one, and skin, as well as creating a dynamic material which will be driven through the blueprints. So let's go do that computer screen next. So to end this volume, we're going to look at how to create this computer screen that we got going. So we're going to have a look at how to create a bar that goes that way and stops when it hits a certain part. We're going to create this bend because this is actually just a straight image. We're going to create these bar movements and these, as well as creating the code that's like snapping up, and then this side it panning. So we're going to start working on that now. So I'm going to quickly we're going to just make a copy of this over in map start, and then I'm just going to double check this. Those save selected, and then here when I can, if you can't select the thing, just make sure you push T. It should select. Okay, so I'm just going to go into Word Outliner. I'm just going to select it there. So we're going to select this, and then I'm just going to come over here and then push Restart to Base Material. And then I'm going to come over to Materials. I'm going to go Compute Screen. And these are our old ones, so I'm just going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call this New. And then in here, we are just going to right click, go to Material, and create our new material, just call it Matte Computer Screen. Okay. Now that we got that, I'm going to drag that into here. This is just going to set this as the default. This doesn't have any lighting in, so if I was to push L and bring a light in here, you would end up then seeing this. But because this, you can see the hologram because it was in dark environment. I'm going to just delete that light again because we'll be able to see this shortly. I'm just going to double check to get this open. And then, not sure what happened there. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to come over to here, and in shading module, we're going to change this to unlit, and then in blend mode, we're just going to change this to additive. And then that's the start of our computer screen. So there we go, we got our emissive color there and opacity. We can add any refraction if we want. Now first, I'm going to want to create, I'm just going to bring in another one, put that next to the side. And then we're going to get the finished one here. I'm just going to pop that onto here. So you can see on this, we have these grid lines at the back, and then we have these faint lines coming down here. So we're just going to create them first. So let's create the grid lines moving up first. So if we do that first. Okay, so I just quickly restarted UE4 because we had some problems with the engine, so they were fixed now. So again, I'm just going to quickly change this back to unlit, and then this back to additive. And then we're going to start working on the grid lines first. So let's get started with that. So we're just going to come down here roughly, and in here we're going to go to textures. I'm going to go hologram, and then we're just going to bring in our picture here. Now if I double click this, and I uncheck alpha, you can see that in the red channel we got the cube, this outline here. In the blue channel is the grid, and in the green channel we have this round design going on. So we're going to use the blue channel on this. So if we can, I'm just going to middle mouse button close that. I'm going to click and drag this up here, and then we will have this. I'm going to multiply this. Because you need to make sure that you got the blue channel selected. If you got all of it selected, you're going to find out that if I start previewing this node, and I'm just going to change this to a constant 1, you're going to get all of the pictures showing, and you don't want that. So if I change this to red, see that we have the outline there, change it to green, we have the round thing there, and then if we change it to blue, I'm just going to bring this down slightly, we have the grid. So that's the first thing that we want to do. Just going to multiply. I'm going to stop looking at this. This is a little bug, so that's going to stay saying that we're previewing this, but we're not. Now I'm going to bring in a vector parameter. I'm going to name it grid color. Okay. And then I'm going to give this a like midish gray, a darkish type gray. I'm just going to bring this then, and then I'm going to add this multiply into our emissive. That's probably not the best way to do it. If you right click this node here, you can go connect to emissive color, and there you go, we have our grid lines there. I want to give this a bit of depth, so I'm just going to come over here and get a bump offset. And what this is going to do is so that when we add our height and coordinate, it's just going to give it a bit more depth, so it looks like this is behind everything else. I'm going to use a constant here, but I'm going to right click and convert this to a parameter, so in case when we look at material instances we can basically change this inside of the instance. I'm going to give this parameter name a grid height. I'm going to leave its value as minus 0.5, that way it should get inverted. Not minus 0.5, there we go. Okay, you can see that it gives this little bend, and if when you zoom in you can definitely see that it bending in the middle there. So we got that effect going. And with this coordinate, because I want this to move, I'm going to get a panner, and then I'm just going to change this in the y-axis by 0.1. Let's see what the speed of that is. Okay, 0.05. Okay, I think that's a pretty good one. There's a bit of tiling error there, but we'll give that a miss. So we basically have that to start off with. So there is the first bit of grid line. Next we're going to create a background. So we're going to do that now. So we're going to grab in a vector parameter. I'm going to name this one here screen background, and we can change all these settings because we're using parameters. When we go through the material instance, we can change all these settings later on. I'm just going to give this a lightish blue, just so that it will show up a bit better. I'm going to multiply this. I'm going to bring this over here a bit more. I'll multiply that and there, and then first let's see what this is going to look like. So if we go add, because we're going to want to add these both together, I'm going to want to add this, try that again, this and this, and then by right clicking that we can connect this to the emissive color. Okay, so now we have our screen, but I want these faint lines that we saw in here, these little lines that you can see faintly going down, just to give it that bit more detail. And we're going to use something called a frac. So I'm just going to move all this stuff over to this side. Okay. And I'm going to want to basically, first we're going to get a frac out. Now that we have our frac, we are going to multiply that by a 1 minus. And you'll be able to see that when we start previewing this, what this is doing. We need to just put a panner in here. And then we're going to, let's use a texture coordinate. And then we're going to mask out the green channel. So just using component mask. And then just bring that into coordinate, sorry. And make sure that you uncheck red, so we just got the blue channel here. That way we got this gradient this way, because if we wanted the gradient the other way, we would be using the red channel. So you can see that if I change this, the gradient's the opposite way, and green is the that gradient there. We're going to put this into a panner because I want these to move. We're going to want this in the, let's just double check what this way was moving. So if this was 0.5, we're going to want this one in the minus. So let's go minus 0.5 for now. So there we go. We got that line just going down there. I'm going to use a append with this. So if I come over here and click on a append vector, and we're just going to use a constant. And if I right click on this so that we can see what we're doing, and when I click 1, you can see that let's just change the color, and we are going to bring that into this multiply. And if I start previewing, there you go, you see the lines there. I'm going to change this to text coordinate, I'm going to change that to, I'm going to say, let's try 25. Okay, that's quite good. Let's try 50. There we go. That looks nice, because when you're at a distance, you get this weird screen type effect going on. So we're going to stick with that. Okay, so basically that frac has pretty much given us this gradient that we've created here, so we get that type of effect going on. And we've just appended this, because if we put that in there, we should get an error. Yeah, you see, because this would be a float too. So if we're putting that in, we're just appending this with a normal there, so that is a X and Y going on. So now that we have this multiply, we're just going to multiply that one more time, and I'm going to want to create another constant, and then I'm going to right click this and go to convert parameter, and we're going to give this parameter a name. So we're going to call this screen underscore line strength. Okay, so now that we have this, let's change this value to a 0.05. You're going to be able to see what we're doing here if we preview this node. You can see because there's 0, we're not getting anything. If I change this to 0.5, we have these showing slightly. If I go to 0.5, let's go 0.05 because that's the one that I had last time, so I know those values. There you go. So you get this nice type of dark color. And then we're just going to add this with that, and then we're going to right click, stop previewing so that we can check these two together. So there you go. So we have our grey grid there, and then we have these faint lines in the back that just stick out ever so slightly. Again, we can make them more prominent if we want to, so I can go 0.25, and then this is going to change it. You can see that it gets a lot brighter. I don't kind of like that effect. You can have that if you like. I thought this one 0.05 looks good enough for me. Okay, I'm actually going to comment these. So if we just drag this over, we can comment this, and we can call this grid lines. And give it a color if we want, so give it an orange type color. And then we're going to also comment out this. I'm going to name this one screen background. Okay, there we go. So next, what we're going to want to do is probably do this line that's going back and forward. So let's quickly, let's go and start doing that. Actually, I just realized that the easiest one probably straight away would be this border. So we can get this border in, because that would, this is probably one of the other easiest things too. We're going to bring in this RGB hollow sheet. So we're just going to bring that into here. I'm just going to bring that up to this section here. Okay, so now that we got that, I'm going to click M as a shortcut for multiply. You can also right click and type in multiply if you like, but I hold M because that's the shortcut to get the multiply up. And we're just going to multiply this with a vector parameter. That way we can change the color of the outline, so we've got an outline color. And I'm just going to change this name to screen border outline. That should do. Okay, I'm going to want something a little bit lighter, so maybe a bit lighter on the grey. And then we're going to, with this multiply, we're going to multiply this again. And we're going to multiply this with a constant. Now the reason we're doing this is that if I start previewing, let's preview this one first. So we can see our grid, oh, my mistake there. We want this red channel, so we're just going to get this red channel and we're going to click it there so it's in there. And then that's going to bring this here. So there you go, we got this white border outline, and I really want to give it a bit more of a bloom, so it shines a bit more, and you can see that it blooms there. You don't have to add the bloom. I just like to add that, so I'm just going to go 10. We're going to start previewing. You're going to see that this is a bit brighter. There we go. It just seems a bit more, it just sticks out a bit more. Okay, now that we have that, we want to give this this bend that we want to get going. So I'm going to stop previewing this node, and then I'm going to preview this one just so that it's less blinding in the viewer. And then, just like last time, down here, we're going to use another bump offset. So I'm just going to drag off this UVs, and I'm going to type in bump offset, and then it's that one there. So get that, and then with the height, we're going to multiply. Again, you can use M or you can drag off and type. Sometimes I end up typing, sometimes I end up using shortcuts. We're going to use a constant, and with this constant, we're looking. First, what you want is a texture coordinate, because what we're going to do is bend it in a so it goes outwards there, and because we want that, so that's going to be the green channel. So just like last time, where the green had the gradient going up and down, anything that's white is going to stick it out. So we'll be bending at those corners. So with this texture coordinate, if I mask out the green channel, so we get the component mask, and just like last time, we want that green channel. So if I go to not convert to parameters, go back, I'm going to start previewing node. You can see that we got that gradient going on there. We're going to get a 1 minus 2, so that way we've got the bottom. So 1 minus, and we're going to multiply these together. And you're going to be able to see what that does. So it basically start previewing nodes. Sorry. Now you can see that we got this gradient on both the top and bottom. I'm going to move this slightly over, and then we're going to actually we don't need to slide that over. We're going to add this to here. We're going to preview this one so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to just change this to 1. Okay. Let's actually check the preview over here so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so there's a slight bend, but it's not that obvious. So let's try 2. Okay, you can see that it's getting a bit more. 3. Okay, that's much better. If we exaggerate that a bit way too much, you're going to see that it comes off the screen. But if you get at the screen at a certain angle, you see that it appears. We're going to go with 3 again. I'm just going to rotate that to make sure it doesn't come off. Yep, that looks good to me. So with that, we can then add this into with these. So creating another add, I'm going to add this with this one up here. Okay, and then we're going to put the emissive color in. Now we're going to want to stop previewing this node. And there we go. Now that I think about it, that brightness, that bloom, though it looks kind of cool, it's a bit blinding. So we're just going to change this to not 0.5, sorry. We're going to change this to, let's try 5. Let's see how good that is. Okay, that's a bit better. It's not too blinding, and it looks kind of nice. I'm just going to hit apply up here, and then we're going to just save as well. So just click that. Now that we got this, let's check that out. As you can see, that it's starting to kind of look like this, and we get close and we get those there. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to create the function for these bars, just so that when we come on to doing that part, that we have it going happening. And then after that, we will quickly move on to creating this sideways thing here, so it goes left and right. And then in the final video, we'll create this section here and this part here. So we're going to do that in the next video. Okay, so next we're going to firstly create this bar, this little orange thing that just slides to the left and right of the screen and stops there, and then stops on that side. So we're going to do that, so we're just going to go back to our new material, or we can click this and then open up that material. We're just going to dock it up here, and then we're going to move all the way up here. We forgot to comment this last time, so we're going to just comment that. So highlighting that and go and see, we're going to name this let's screen border. There we go. And let's just give it a green color. And go. Can move that over here. Now up here we're going to grab the texture that we need. So we have in textures and hologram, we have this gradient line, which is just this line here. We created one. I created this in Photoshop instead because it was just easier. I'm just going to bring it over and pop it into this. Okay. Now that we have that, we're going to add a color to it first. So I'm just going to multiply this with a vector parameter, and we're going to move that here. Right click, and not right click. Sorry, we're going to come over here. And we're going to just name this bar color, and we're going to give that that orange tint, that orange yellow tint that we saw. Okay, and I kind of want to give this a bit of brightness as well, so we're going to multiply this to add some bloom like we did with the border. Sorry. So we're going to just convert this to a parameter and call this bar underscore brightness, and we're going to leave this, let's try 5. Just going to preview this so we can have a quick look. Let's try 10. Let's see what the 10 does. And that's probably a bit too much, so yeah, we'll go back to 5. Yeah, that looks fine. Now we just need to basically get this fitting with the alpha, and we made the alpha with this one, so we can tell the bar to only be in this area. So we're going to bring in one of these again, and down here we're going to stop previewing this node, and then we're going to want to multiply this. So we want that to be multiplied with this alpha, and then if we start previewing, we have just the bar right down there. Now we need this to basically go left and right and stop when it hits the borders. Firstly, although I'm going to, so we can see this, I'm going to make an add over here, and I'm going to add this, I'm going to connect that to the emissive, and then we're going to add the parts that we're doing up here. Okay, I'm just going to bring these in a bit closer to make it neater. Okay, so we got that there. We know we want it panning, so let's bring in a panner. So I'm going to go right click and type in panner, and then I'm going to bring that in there. As for the speed, we're going to have 0.5 because we want that going in this axis, so we want that going on. And because that, of course, is still not doing what we want, we're going to end up using some more nodes. And I know that, so we're going to pretty much come over here. We're going to get a not texture, we want a time, and I want to multiply this by just by 1. Okay, we're just doing that. That's going to set the speed for us. If we preview this, let's not preview that, sorry, bring this in, you can see that it's a normal speed. You get this weird thing going on here. We don't want that to happen. We're going to stop that from happening, so if we get a sign, and then we just pop that in there. This should be still moving left. Okay, that is why I popped that into the coordinate. We want it into time, so if I brought that over here again, you can see that's the speed, and if I change this value here to something more, it's going a lot quicker. And if I was to change that to a 0.5, we get it really moving slowly. In 0.01, you can see it really drags. So we're just keeping that 1 just so it's normal. Then we're going to pop the sign back into the time, so that way it's going to move back and forwards. There we go. So it's like a ping pong now. Because we want it to stop around here and we want it to stop around here, we're going to use a clamp. So just bring in that clamp and put that into the time. And as you can see, it stops dead in the middle of the screen. Because we don't want it stopping right in the middle there, we want it to have a set place. So we're going to move this as check first what number this is. So if we change that to 0.5, we can see that it stops there. Okay, so we want 0.8. Okay, that's nice where it stops right there. And then over here, because this is 0, we want minus 0.8 on that, so we're going to set that min to minus 0.8, and it should stop around here. There we go. And now that we got that, we can easily change it so it takes a lot longer, and change it to 0.1 so it's a lot quicker. I'm going to put that at 1. Then remember, we can use this time here to change the speed of that too. I'm going to leave that at 1. I'm going to leave this one at 1 too. Let's change it to 0.5. Sorry, we want 2. Okay, that's nice enough. Now that we've done that, I'm just going to comment this out. I'm going to call this slide bar. Oh, it's not typing in. Try that again. Slide bar. There we go. And let's give that an orange yellow tint. Okay. Now next we want to get these the bars up in the screen, and we're going to be using this thing called the gradient bar. So we have this bar like that, and that's going to basically go up and down, as you can see in the alpha. So there's enough space for it to go up and down, it disappear and appear. So firstly, how are we going to do this? Well, on here we created a material function so these could run, because if I show you quickly, we have this material function here called hologram bar. Well, we created this because inside of this function what we would need would be a lot bigger. I do have a picture that I can show you that shows that with this material function, if we had the material with the material function, we've got this, and if without the material function, we would have all this clutter at the back. And it's just basically shortening this down so that we've got more room to in the thing, and we're not cluttering up the material. So we're going to do this inside the material function. So I'm going to close this, and then we're going to come all the way into materials, computer screen, go to new. I'm going to right click here, and scrolling down to materials and textures, we want this material function. Once you type that, we're going to basically type in computer bar. Okay, to quickly save. I'm going to click enter to open this, and as you see, this is the material function window, and we have an output here which is going to be the result. And we don't have a result yet, so we're going to do that. We're going to pretty much get a texture sample first. So well, we want a texture object, so going back to textures and then hologram, making sure that this is selected, I'm going to come in here and right click texture object. And now that we have the texture object and we have that gradient, we can add this. You won't be able to do it straight away because it's a 2D, not compatible with a float. So we want to bring in a texture sample. Oh, there we go. Okay, now that we got that sample, we are going to bring that up here, and we're going to pop this into the output, and then you will see that bar there. Okay. Now next we want this panning, so I'm just going to bring in a panner, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to want to move this in the, I'm going to want this moving in the y-axis, so I'm just going to bring this over to 0.5. Now we're not going to see any change here because it's going 0.5, so it's moving up that direction, and it's the exact same. But I'm going to want to clamp these values so that we're only moving at a set placement, especially when we are doing the alpha. So with this clamp, I'm going to pretty much just change this to 0, and I'm going to change this to -1 because I want to get it down further but not up. Okay, and then we're going to multiply this with a sine. So let's get a sine wave in here. And that's just going to complain because we haven't added a time in there. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to actually multiply this with a time, just like we did last time. but because we want a constant and we can't add that, if I type in constant, we can add that, sorry, but we want to be able to change these values outside, and there's no point converting to the parameter. So we're going to come over here and we're going to type in input. So this will give us basically stuff that we can input into the function to get that scalar, and we want to keep that as scalar. You can see that here we can input things like textures, booleans, and other vectors, but we're going to just leave this as it is. We're going to call this sine time 1. Okay, so we got our first sine time, and then with this multiply, we're going to basically want to create another bunch of these things, because we want 4 bars altogether, so we want them to be able to change in different values. Because we want the sign, instead of it just constantly be going up and down like that, we kind of want to give it a different variation. So sometimes it would go up and then it would snap down, and maybe it go up and maybe it pop up a little bit more and then go down, and it's a bit more random. So to make it a tiny bit more random, we're just going to add together a couple of these sine nodes, and we're going to copy this stuff here. So I'm just going to copy and paste that, and we're going to multiply. Oh, we need the sine as well, so we're just going to grab that, pop that into there, and we're going to call this one 2. We're going to just copy and paste this, and we're going to put that one over here, and we're going to call this one 3, 0, 3. There we go. So that is going to be that. Next, we're going to want to actually use a alpha. So I'm going to actually make another function output, and this result is going to be the alpha result. So if I just name this alpha, okay, and I'm going to call this one gradient. And then I'm going to, because I don't want this moving, so I'm going to just double that, and then with the texture, I want to use the exact same texture, and I want the alpha from this one into that one, and we're just going to see that it's just basically a complete white, which shouldn't be. So we will fix that by coming up here, down here, and we're going to go add. I'm going to add some stuff here. So we're going to add a texture coordinate, and we want to input so we can change where the place of these bars are. So we're going to go input, and we're going to change this to a vector 2. Okay, and we're going to name this UV location. Okay, and I'm just going to change this to 10. And then let's start previewing this. Okay, in here we also want to just change some of these values. So coming back over here into these, we're going to want to make sure that in X we got 1, and I'm just going to do that the same on all these. And then as for our UV location, just making this window a bit more bigger, we're going to change this to 0.5. See what we get there. Okay, let's stop previewing that. We're going to want to clamp this as well. Come here and go to clamp. I'm going to want to do the same here. Clamp. Okay, now you can see the line is there and it's not continuously going. So that was one thing that we missed. Okay, and I'm going to change this to also, I'm going to copy this value here, so minus 0.5, and then we'll get the rest as they are, and then hopefully this should be in its space. Okay, that looks pretty good. Won't worry about these because it'd be a matter of fact of seeing if this works. So let's check this out and see if it's going to work inside of here. So firstly, let's get our, because we have the texture already, we can just right click and then we can go hologram, a function, and then it's this material function cell. Just click that, and then here you go, we can see that we get the hologram bar coming straight up, but we want the computer bar because that's the one that we made. And looking at both of these, we've got pretty much the exact same stuff going on. We actually use a cosine in this one by the looks of it, so we got a cosine with some times, but for now we're just going to keep with 3 times. And then we got our alpha and gradients up here. I'm going to multiply these together and just check that. I'm going to preview this quickly, and we're going to get errors because we haven't got anything in these. And as you can see, we need a scalar, 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 and a vector too. So I'm going to bring in a constant, and then I'm just going to copy and paste this 2 more times so we can connect that into that one and this one into that one. Bring that up, and we want a vector 2 for that. So that's just basically bringing in a constant 2 vector. Okay, now that we have them. So the engine's basically crashed, but I've managed to re-add all this stuff and I've got it working. I got it working by going to the compute bar and replacing this with the gradient bar because I was silly enough to have the gradient line attached to it. So that's where the mistake was. And I also made sure that with this section here, we just had that going into the coordinate as well of the panel so that the coordinates had changed. Okay, so now that we got both of them in, we can just quickly now start sorting out our problem. So we're going to create the first bar, and we're going to move that in the believe it's -5 to move it over. Yep, and then we kind of want that up, so we want, I believe it's, let's try 2. Not 2, let's try 0.2. So that ends up moving it up slightly. Let's try 0.3. Okay, so that's nice enough. And then if we start messing around with these values, I'm just going to randomize these values a bit. Change that to 6. Okay, that's a bit too quick, so I'm going to go back to, let's go 2.5. Okay, that one's a bit hectic, so we're going to go 1. I'm going to change this one to 0.25. Okay, so that's bobbing up and down. Now for the rest of this, we're going to, because we want these to have some colors, we're going to multiply this with a vector parameter. And then we're going to give them I'm going to just give it a green color. And then we're just going to call these just bars color. And then we're going to, I also want to give these a bloom, so we're going to multiply that, and we're going to, by a constant, and then we're going to right click, convert this to a parameter, and we're just going to name this bars brightness, and we're going to give that a value of 5. And then with this multiplier, we want to get that into the add node, which is over here, and then that should get the bar up. Okay, so next we're going to, I'm just going to hit apply, and I'm going to save that because I had to remake some of this because I didn't save. So make sure you're saving. Okay, so there we go, we've got that bar in there. It looks like we're going to have to probably move it over once we get this thing in there. So next we're going to, I'm going to off the screen make the rest of these because it's pretty much just multiplying, adding more of these together, and then changing these values. And then in the next video we're going to look at how to create this thing and the scrolling code text. So we're going to go and do that next. So now let's finish off creating the rest of our hologram texture. So we're going to do this part first, so with the screen border and the running text, and then we're going to do these spinning details up here. We're going to do that outside one, and then I'm going to probably do the second one off screen, just so that we it's so we can fit this all in one more video, and then we're going to go over that spinning detail. So we're going to go and do that now. So I want to open up this texture. Okay, on a computer screen. And then we're going to go over to textures, holograms, and then we want this RGB Holo Sheet 2, which is, once I open it, we have our alpha there for where the text should be, and then we have some code which I just grabbed off the internet and I copied and pasted it just so it was smaller over this side. And then we got in the blue channel the spinning detail, one of the spinning details. The other spinning part is on this one, if you remember. Just get rid of that alpha. There we go, that part there. So firstly, let's grab this and drag it into here, and I'm just gonna do that. Let's see, let's move this back here, and we want to bring that with it. Okay, so this should be a simple one because it's just the screen border from the red channel. So we're going to multiply this with a vector parameter like last time, so we can change the color. Vector parameter, and then we're just going to call this screen outline. No, we're not. Code outline color. Now we're going to multiply this with a constant one, and then we're going to name this code outline brightness. Okay, and then we're just going to give this a default value of 5, and then we're going to give this color a yellowish, yellowish, kind of light yellow. Get the top up there, and then click OK. And then we've got that. We want to add this, so let's get adding that. I'm just going to flatten this so we can see it. So I'm just going to bring in an add, holding down the A. It's a shortcut. I'm going to pop that into there, and then we're going to need to drag this pin all the way over here. Okay, so we now have that. I think the brightness might be a bit too big, so we're going to set that as 2. Okay, awesome. That looks great. We're going to move this over so we can get more space. Okay. Now next we want to get that code, so I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to move this over here, comment it, and just call it code screen. Okay. Then we're going to paste that over here. I'm going to make a bit more room because what we're going to want to do with this is quite a bit. Because we're going to want to, let's move that over here, this down. Because with this we're going to want one side of the text to basically snap, and then we're going to want this side of the text to basically smoothly move up. First, let's create the one that's going to basically snap up like that. And we're going to want to first get a panner, because we know that we're going to want this panning up, and then we're going to just change this to like 0.5 for now. And then way over here, I'm going to grab a time. And before, like last time, we're going to multiply this with a constant just so that we can control our speed of the time. I'm going to change this to 1.5, not 0.5, 1.5. Okay. And then I'm going to want to create a floor for this. So with the floor, we're always going to be rounded down to the bottom numbers. So if this is 0.6, this is going to be 0, and if this is 1.5, it's going to be 1. I'm just going to leave that as 1.5 at the moment, because what we want to do is we want to divide this. So I'm going to get a division, and I'm going to actually divide it by this original time here. And then if we pop this in here, we'll be able to see what we are doing. We want to make sure that's in the time. Bring that over, and then we're going to preview this node so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so you can see that it's basically snapping. If we just had the floor, you can see that it jumps really high. You can see that it's much bigger. Because we're dividing it by that number there, it's going to jump up only a little bit more. And we can make it less if we want to. So if we change this to, so if we got 10, The more higher the number it is, the quicker it's gonna like go up. But we want to leave that at 1.5 because that looks nice with that amount. And we're going to want to remember that we're going to need to use the green channel from this, so let's get doing that. Now I know that in here I want this scrolling text snapping to be on this side, but we have both the alphas for both of these bars. Now I will basically get a multiply and show you what I'm talking about. And if we multiply that with each other, and then I'm going to stop previewing this, and I'm going to come all the way over here and create another add node so we can see what's going on. Connect these components up, and then we want to grab that and then find our piece that we've been doing over here. There we go. We connect that, and you can see that the text is moving, but if we copy and paste that and then move that here, then we will get that stop moving. So you can see that the text is moving. Okay, we need a green channel. So there we go. So the text is moving, but it's also snapping over that bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in this gradient bar. I'm going to bring it over here. And then I'm going to want this to be on that side so I can change how far it's going to be. We're going to use something called a custom rotator. So that way we can rotate this value over. And we're going to get a texture coordinate, and we're going to multiply this. Not multiply, sorry, we want to add this because we want to be able to move this. So add, and then let's get a constant 2 because we need the x and y. And then in x, we're going to move that by 0.75. And then in our we want to put that into UVs. You can see that it's asking for feed 2, so we've got moved that there. And then in our rotation center, we're going to bring in a constant 2 as well, because we want the center to be halfway through the image. So we're going to want 0.5 and then minus 0.5. And then we are going to also want here just one constant. And we're going to change this to 0.25. And that should end up rotating this around. Just going to click live update and so we can see it. Let's quickly preview this. Okay, so we can see that that's working. I'm going to clamp this texture so we don't have that white bit on that section. There we go. So now it's on this side only. And then we're going to obviously want to invert this. So we want a 1 minus. And then we're going to multiply these ones together. And then add that to this multiply. Then we should have the scrolling text just on this side. Now I'm going to grab this, and then we're going to do the other panner one. But because we know that we want this one smoother, we can just use a normal panner. And again, I'm going to use 0.5 going up. And then we need to basically copy this bit here, because we're going to want this the other way around. Actually, because we need it that way, because we don't need to invert it this time. So we're going to use the exact same alpha, but without the 1 minus. And then when we multiply this, not that, the green channel, sorry, with this, because we want that green channel for that smooth text. I think maybe that's a bit too quick, so I'm going to change that to 0.25. Actually, I'm going to want to let's multiply that one together first. No. So we get the green channel, and then we can multiply, because we need that alpha and the opacity there. Okay, then let's add these two together. Then hopefully this will work the way we've intended it. Actually, let's get in a multiply, and we're going to want to be able to. We want the to change the color, so we want a vector parameter. There we go. And then we're just going to call this code underscore color, and we're just going to make this reddish color. Then we're going to want another multiplier just so that we can control the code brightness if we need to do it. I'm just going to change this to 2. Okay, now that we got that, we can bring this all the way over here and then see how this is looking. Okay, I think that is still a bit too fast. Oh, don't want to do that. So I'm going to come back over here and we're going to change this to 0.0, 0.5. Okay, so that's better. I'm going to click apply just so that we can preview that. Okay, so it's not as obvious, so we're going to pretty much change the brightness here. So let's change that to 10, see how much it shows here now. Okay, that looks better. Okay, that looks good. I think maybe we should bring down the back of the thingy, because this one's a little less on that, where this is more obvious, the grid lines. So we're just going to quickly change the grid lines. Okay, that's a little bit better. Right, next we want to add the spinning detail. So we're going to start with the let's start with the middle one. First, let's comment this because we want to be able to tell what this is. So we're going to click C, so shortcut, and then type in code. Okay, and I'm just going to randomly give that a color. Okay, so now we want to add more to this material. So I'm just going to move a few things over.